Hi everybody, welcome back to the Evermore podcast, Newcastle United podcast and the Evermore YouTube channel. We are back with a very special episode. We've got a really big anniversary coming this weekend. So we're going to take a little walk down memory lane in a second with a special guest. But holding my hand on this journey is our resident PK blinder. It's PK, the founder of the No Dickhead policy himself. How are you, PK?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. You?
Yeah, fantastic, mate. Really good, really good. We're going to get stuck in a minute and we'll bring in our special guest. Just before we do, a little bit of housekeeping. If you haven't already, please click that like and subscribe button. We'd love you to come and join us. We're on about 1856 subs now, which is great. So there's been a few more of you hit that button this morning after the morning magpie. So we really appreciate that. But this is all free content. We don't charge anybody. It's tough times at the moment. So, we just love talking about the club. And we're going to get a special guest on in a minute to talk about a very special day. So what we're going to do, PK, is we're going to run a little VT, as Keith Lemon would say, and then we'll be joined by our special guest in a minute. Hopefully, it will make him feel a little bit nostalgic. So I'm going to run the VT now, and we'll bring our special guest in a second. Enjoy this, guys.
Finally, the Newcastle United supporters have got what they have wanted for a long, long time. It's the Premier League, Newcastle United Football Club and St James's Holdings Limited today settled the dispute over the takeover of the club by the consortium of PIF, PCP Capital Partners and the Reuben Brothers Sports and Media Company. Following the completion of the Premier League's owners and directors test, the club has been sold to the consortium with immediate effect.
As you can see there, great memories, and we've been joined by the main man himself, the man who's been as associated with the takeover as #Cans. It's Sky Sports only, Keith Downey. How are you, Keith?
Hi guys. That was firstly, it was good to watch again. I can't believe it's been a year. Secondly, your sort of edit of it there was a lot more concise than I was on the day. I felt like I rambled on for hours. So so thanks for that.
Yeah, you say rambling, Keith. For us, it was sweet music to our ears, mate. We could hear it over and over again, to be honest with you. So it was absolutely incredible. But we're going to get stuck in, mate. We're going to try and take you back. Obviously, it's been a year. You've had a hell of a lot happening in your crazy Sky Sports career since then, mate. But we'll get stuck straight into it. So memories of that crazy day, mate. I mean, when you woke up that morning, to get in there and do your normal day's duties. Did you have any idea? Were your journalistic spidey senses tingling that this was going to be as big of a day as you maybe thought it was going to turn out to be?
Yeah, I mean, the bags under my eyes will have probably shown you that I kind of knew what was to come. We obviously knew the night before that it was going to happen. Kind of knew the afternoon before, to be honest, but due to the amount of times the takeover had kind of fallen through, as you guys well know, to your own cost, it was strange. I just could not believe it until I actually saw it there at the statement there in my hand, and you heard me reading out the statement there in that little piece, the edit that you put up there, and I'd been looking at that statement for about 2-3 hours in the afternoon and reading it over and over and over again. And I'd been sent it to someone by someone who said, "Look, you're only one of a handful of people who've got this." So I kind of knew all afternoon that it was done, but couldn't really say anything. And normally I would kind of tell a few people close to me, "Look, this is what I'm hearing," or whatever. But even my cameraman who was there, I didn't tell him. I didn't tell the presenter. I didn't tell anyone because I was just so scared and worried that it might fall through yet again. So. It was a strange old afternoon, but the day itself, I woke up in the morning. We knew it was going to happen, largely due to the fact that the part of the consortium were already on Tyneside, and I'd actually been to see them at the hotel the sort of late afternoon, round about tea time the night before, and they told me exactly what was going to happen, how it was going to happen. This was the timeline of events over the next 24 to 48 hours. It didn't really happen that way. Everything got knocked back. I thought at one stage we were going to be announcing it. Well, I went to bed the night before, getting ready to get up at 6 o'clock, thinking we're going to be announcing it at 10 a.m. But obviously, the way things worked, and it's a huge transaction, a massive amount of money. There was so much that needed to be tidied up in terms of the takeover as a whole that it kind of dragged on till around tea time. And I think what happened was it was one of those days where it just built up and it built up. Every hour, every half hour. It was international break, so we were quite quiet at Sky Sports News, and I was doing lives throughout the whole day. every half an hour. So it kind of built up to this kind of crescendo at 5 o'clock when everyone was finishing work for the day. You know, people were either on their way home, or, you know, kids had finished school and they were sitting around the dinner table. And I think that's why it ended up being such a celebration in the evening. Had it happened at 10 o'clock in the morning, it might have petered out a little bit through the day, but it just built up into that crescendo. So yeah, it was the night before we were pretty much told it was happening. So I didn't get much sleep the night before. I was just kind of playing over in my head how I was going to announce this, how I was going to break it, how I was going to word it. And then when it happened on the day, despite the fact I'd been looking at the statement for about 3 hours, when it actually happened, I just kind of went freestyle, and I didn't really know what I said at the time. So, you know, I've obviously seen it back a few times since, and I'm quite critical. So I kind of say to myself, oh, I wish I'd said that better, or I stumbled here or stumbled there, or I didn't read that bit quite properly. But there was just so much adrenaline going through you at that point, because you knew what you were saying was a massive deal to so many people. I knew it was going to be an emotional time for so many fans across the world, and it was obviously what you guys had been waiting for so long. So, you know, you can kind of look at it and say, I wish I'd done that better, said that different. But listen, that was what happened at the time. And the crucial thing was that the takeover went through, and you guys were allowed to dream again, because obviously for so long that hadn't been in the case. But the interesting thing in all of this was the day before, I'd actually been golfing over in Sunderland at a golf course at Whitburn on the beach near South Shields. And I kind of got a call when I was on about, I think, the third or the fourth, I think it was the third hole I was on. I got a call to say, look, this is definitely happening now. And I managed to get to about the 12th, and then I just was playing with my mate, and I said, listen, mate, I need to go here. My mind's not on this. There's too much going on. And I just had to walk off at the 12th and come back and, you know, get ready to break the news. At that stage, there was word that it might even have happened that night. So anyway, the way it worked, it gave us a little bit of time to digest it. And then by the time 5 o'clock came the next night, we were so immersed in the story that we knew everything that was going on. So it actually worked out really well in the end. Doesn't often work like that in TV, but it was actually a really good few days, or a good sort of 48 hours for Sky Sports News, because I felt we kind of led a lot of the agenda that day, and there wasn't much else happening in the Premier League because it was International Week. So we got loads and loads of coverage, which I think really was deserving of the speed of the story.
Absolutely. To be fair, Keith, at least you had a good excuse. I walk off on the 12th every time anyway, just because I'm rubbish, to be fair. You had a good reason, mate. But just before PK comes in with his question, you delivered it brilliantly, mate. I know you've been critical of yourself there, but it was a fantastic, you know, delivery, the way you did it. And did you feel that sense of pressure? I mean, you've obviously done a lot in your career, you know, up to date. Did that feel like a real weight on your shoulder, almost for the first time in a long time, that you thought, wow, that, you know, I need to get this right, as you said, you know, because it's so important.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there was huge pressure when Rangers, where I previously worked up in Scotland, went into administration and in liquidation. It was the biggest story in Scottish football for nearly 50 years. It was huge. And, you know, there was huge pressure on getting that right. It was a very difficult story to understand in terms of the language you had to use. And it was just something, you were essentially talking about business rather than football, which is, you're taking out your comfort zone. So that was difficult. My own team, Hearts, who I grew up supporting, went into administration themselves. And I remember standing outside St James's Park, I remember standing outside Tynecastle breaking the news that day, and it was breaking my heart as I was saying it. So there's times where you felt the pressure for different reasons, even just going down into the studio on Sky Sports News and being on set and talking to the presenters and being around when all the different staff are there and producers and everyone listening is pretty high pressure. But I have to say, the feeling that I got when I broke that takeover news that day was one like I've not had any in my career. And I think that was because, as I alluded to already, I knew what I was saying. One was going to change everything for everyone, and it meant so much to so many other people. And we almost, as journalists in the Northeast, became collateral damage a little bit in the whole failure of the takeover going through, because we so many times had said, look, we think it's happening now. And this is before even the Saudis came to the table. Like previous groups who we maybe got led down the garden path with, who were maybe a little bit naive in terms of what we believed. And because we kind of got people's hopes up and then dashed them, we kind of got caught up. And listen, it hurt us as well, and it disappointed us, and we hated the fact that our reputations were maybe on the line as a result of it. So it had been so close so many times that I was unwilling to believe it until I saw it in black and white, as I said there in the little clip that you showed. And it was, the reason I kind of got emotional on the day was because it was a build-up of adrenaline throughout I thought it was throughout the day, but looking back now, it was probably throughout the last 2 or 3 years when we'd become so close to saying it was done, but not saying it was done. And I remember sometimes, like, you know, I remember when, I think it was the previous April when it fell through, the previous July, and it fell through, and I had my parents down visit me for the day, and we were in the middle of having lunch in Jesmond, and you know, I said, Dad, I'm going to have to go to the stadium here and break this news that the takeover's off. And he came with me, and you could see that I was upset and I was disappointed because I knew I was delivering news that nobody else wanted to hear. And I remember when I put them on the train to go home that night, and I just went for a walk around the city for about 3 hours on my own. And I just was like, felt really kind of down about the fact that, you know, all that work and all that kind of research and speaking to people and hope that it might go through for us as journalists as well, for us professionally as well as you guys for fans, for it to fall through. So I think when it did go through last October, it was just the adrenaline of it all finally going through, leaving my body. And, you know, I answered the question to Rob, who was a presenter who'd come up with me from London to kind of share the load a little bit. And I answered the first question to him, handed back, and I thought, right, he's going to hand back to the studio here. So I just kind of let myself go a little bit. I could just feel it was like an out-of-body experience. And the next minute, he addressed the camera, turned around to ask me another question, and I was like, oh God, I'm about to cry here. And I managed to just about hold it in. So I think that just summed up the pressure of it. It was a release of pressure, a release of adrenaline. And as I said a couple of times, I knew what I was saying meant so much to you guys, and how much it was going to make other people happy. Do you know what? Probably, like, you know, you do like a bit like that, built up for a while. You finally say it. You know, it's a big moment for so many other people, and then you kind of let your emotions get the better of you. So that was what happened on the day, and it's amazing. I still get people coming up to me all the time and going, "Thanks very much for crying. Thanks so much for crying." I was like, I did it on purpose, you know. But yeah,
have you got any free pints for it, though, Keith? Has anybody give you a free pint for that yet in the city centre?
From about October to Christmas, I don't think I bought a beer in town, and I'm out. And by the way, I'm out quite a lot. I don't think I did, but I have noticed in this year, I don't know if it's just energy prices and cost of living going up, I've noticed those offers of free drinks are drying up a little bit.
Well, I'll buy you one next time I see you.
There you go, mate. That's great in the bag. Absolutely. Well, PK's got a question for you next, mate. Go on, PK, kick him in.
Yes, sorry, the hairs on the back of my neck are probably standing up here. What, 363 days ago? Unbelievable, man, really. So we got the point, you know, at what point you first got the wind of it. You sort of got that 24, 48 hours beforehand. How did you prepare yourself for what turned out to be a massive turning point in the history of Newcastle United?
Well, interestingly, I know I've said that I kind of got wind of it, you know, what would it be in the Wednesday sort of lunchtime. But interestingly, I had over the summer been kind of looking at the fact that the takeover had been aborted, and my boss had said to me, "Look, Keith, I really want you to do some kind of investigation here into why it's not happened." So I'd actually put 2 or 3 months of work into speaking to the Premier League, speaking to Mike Ashley, speaking to Lee Charnley, different people involved, speaking to Amanda Slater, trying to speak to people and get information as to why it was at an impasse. So I'd actually put quite a bit of work in this. I'd written to all the Premier League clubs asking about what had been said in meetings, because obviously there was a lot of kind of conjecture and there's a big grey area as to what had been said and what hadn't been said. And it was a real task I'd been given. I received a call from someone who would know, who's got a fair idea about things that are going on, round about 4 weeks before the takeover went through, and I was explaining about this investigation I was trying to do. I wasn't really getting very far, but I was trying. And the call said, "Look, sit tight just now on what you're doing. Don't go any further with that, because what I'm hearing is things have the potential to change pretty quickly." And that was how it was worded to me. It wasn't the takeover was going to go through. It wasn't the takeover was going to. I didn't know how to read it. I wanted to believe it was a takeover was going to go through, but my reading of the situation, and I was probably a little bit negative due to what had gone on in the past, my reading of the situation was, it might just be going away. They might be pulling away totally, and that's it. So I sat tight for 4 weeks, and then obviously what happened. So, you know, people always say first year, like I wasn't told it was going to happen, but I knew that there was something in the offing one way or the other. So then when I heard that the consortium were travelling there and I was to meet them at the hotel, I was like, right, that's what that meant. So it was kind of double boost for me, Paul, because I one, didn't have to carry on with that investigation, which was absolute torture trying to find information on that, and two, obviously got to announce the takeover. So it worked out well. But just briefly on how I prepared myself. I mean, obviously I went to bed the night before and I had all these ideas in my head of how I was saying it and how I was going to do it. Didn't sleep that much that night. Woke up, I was like, this is a big day here. This is a big day. It turned out to be a really, really long day. I don't think I got home until midnight, but I just kind of, put a few notes on my phone and said to myself, this is how I'm going to do it. But with everything that happened throughout the day, honestly, it just goes out the window, and you end up just kind of going a bit freestyle towards the end, and the adrenaline kicks in, and you just kind of do what you do at the time. And as I say, I've watched it back, and I'm like, I could have done better with that. But I think overall, when I look back, I'm pleased that I was there, and we've been through so many hard times reporting it. I was pleased that I was there that day and I wasn't on holiday or whatever. So it was good to be front and centre of it. And as I say, it's really nice that you're out and about before, after games, even like midweek, you get people coming up to you and wanting to talk about all the time. And I probably told the same story, similar sort of things I'm speaking to you about over and over again, and people just constantly say, "Oh God, the hairs on the back of my neck are standing up" as you're explaining it. And I'm not trying to in any way talk it up. I'm literally just explaining exactly what happened and what was going through my mind at the time. So it's nice that day still has, still evokes that sort of emotion from the supporters a year on.
Yeah, it reminded me of, Keith, as well. PK, I remember this because you would have been at the game as well. I remember when we were in the FA Cup and Keegan was coming back, and it just came out of nowhere. And I remember being in Pacific Bar in Newcastle with Mark, actually does the Evermore podcast with us. And we were having a pint, and it went from being a crap cup replay to the Kings coming back, and the whole city just. It was electric. It was electric, and that's the nearest to the takeover I can probably say, Keith, that I remember experiencing.
It felt a little bit like see, standing up in that car park, looking down, and I could see the fans had all congregated, and there was the crowds were getting bigger and bigger through the night. It felt like, and obviously I've reported on cup finals and cup wins and stuff before I started covering Newcastle, by the way.
Sadly,
it felt like a club. It felt like you won the FA Cup or something. And the one vision I've got that just plays over my head over and over again is I remember looking out over the car park where we were positioned doing lives, and I'll be there on Friday again doing some bits and pieces to mark the anniversary. But I remember looking out, and there was one fan walking right down down Barrack Road there, where there's a kind of, not a walkway in the middle, but there's almost just like a little sort of pedestrianised little thin bit in the middle between the two islands going the other way. Yeah, like an island, like a sort of trap, and he's just walking right down the middle of the road with this massive Newcastle flag over his shoulder, like on a stick, and there's fans everywhere, and there's cars just going past, peeping their horn, and it was almost just a bit like, it reminded me a bit of that. Remember that Graham Souness when he stuck the flag in the ground and he said, and I just remember looking over at that point, and I turned around to my camera with a couple of cameramen. I was like, guys, can we get? And they were all right. The two of them were already on the shot because they could see as well. It was just such a really, really nice shot. And whenever I look at back and I look at that picture, that's the one that gets me going more than anything, because I remember what I was thinking at that time.
I think I remember when Mike Ashley took over from Freddie Shepherd, and it was like, ooh, bought whatever he bought at club for, buttons really. And it was like, oh, we've got a billionaire in charge of our football club. We're going to go places here. How exciting. But this had been built up for so long. I mean, this had literally been a 4-year Amanda Staveley build-up when she was first at that Liverpool game, wasn't she? And she was trying to broker and introduce people to buy the club, etc. And it always been a stage of, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Then that 2 years prior, when Ashley called her a tire kicker and a waste of time, and you just thought, why is she keep going and keep going and keep? I'm glad she did, but she just kept going, and obviously brought the real big players to the table. And it's like, this just felt like, as you said yourself, Keith, this felt like a culmination of 2 years worth of highs, and it was like a roller coaster ride for every, never mind journalist, for every Newcastle fan. Going to happen. It's not going to happen. Peter Kenyon's interested in buying the club. Somebody in America wants their club, and then it's like, it's obviously all a load of nonsense, so to speak. But when that happened, and I think it was on the Wednesday that I suppose the fans started to get wind of it on Twitter, that, I think they just finished that case, that court case, haven't they, about whatever it was.
Arbitration. Yeah, it was all that, wasn't it? Yeah, I remember that.
And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, they've lifted the ban on, they've lifted the piracy and all that kind of stuff. oh, the takeover's going to happen, the takeover's going to happen. It's like, oh my God. So I don't think I slept the night before, just on the in the nose on Twitter. It's definitely happening, you know, blah, 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 blah. Hedging their bets somewhat. And then I was, you know, working at home on that Thursday. And, you know, when cameras kept going over and you could see something to start out and you just think, oh my God. And it's just like, I don't know. I couldn't believe it. Probably, you know, I've been a season ticket holder for 30 years. I don't think anything better has ever happened for the long-term future of the club.
Do you know another little interesting side note to that you've just reminded me of there? On the morning of the takeover going through, the day before the takeover went through on the Wednesday, I'd received an email with a red exclamation mark that was from a really good source involved in the takeover, who I'd never heard from before. It was an anonymous email, and I looked at where it came from, and I was like, that is legit, right? And it was this exact same info that I think you might remember either the Telegraph or the Times had ran on the Wednesday saying, look, the ban on beIN Sports has been lifted because the issues they had with the rights had been lifted, so that meant the takeover was free to go through. And I didn't notice it until maybe 10, 11 o'clock on takeover day, and that'd been sitting in my junk folder for 24. Probably the biggest story I've ever worked on, and I could have had it 24, maybe more than that hours earlier, sitting there in my junk folder. And I looked through, and all the exact information in it was the exact information that I think it was one of the sheets I'd put out the previous day. And I remember looking, where did he get this info from? Where did he get this info? And for the last 24, 36 hours, it had actually been sitting in my junk folder. And I was like, that's the most important email I've ever had. And I was sitting in my junk, and it was basically saying, look, the takeover can go through now. And I'm like sitting there the night before going, right, I know it's going to go through. We've got the consortium here, but why? And all the information was documented in that email that I missed because I was sitting in my junk folder. Honestly, you couldn't make it up, like. But there we go.
I was quite bored. I was going for a run actually, and my phone started lighting up, and all my mates were going, take over. And I just stopped kind of mid-run, and there was dogs sniffing around my legs and everything. I was just staring at my phone, seeing what was going on. But it was absolutely incredible keeping there. You know, like you said, it's a monumental day in Newcastle United's history. But just kind of fast forward a little bit, you know, to the year that's gone by. We're always keen to hear about this from professionals like yourself, because we see it from our side as fans. You know, we see it on the pitch. You know, we see the way the teams come together. How have things changed from, you know, I suppose yourself from a professional point of view from the Ashley era? You mentioned you spoke to Mike Ashley there before. Sometimes he seems to be the Wizard of Oz head in the room that people don't think he ever talked to anybody, but he obviously did speak to people now and again. But how do you feel it's changed? We see Eddie Howe in the press conference, you guys, he always calls you by first names. He's always very pleasant. Do you feel as a professional it's a bit more welcoming, a bit more warmer now than used to be? Or?
Yeah, well, I suppose the first thing to say is Mike Ashley wouldn't sit and do a press conference. So, and you have to say that he kind of put his cards on the table and said, look, I'm speaking to Sky and nobody else. And I think everyone knew it was us that he did, yeah. And that's where the info came from. Now for me, from a very selfish point of view, I've now got all the other journalists to compete with, because they're obviously all getting stories and stuff now as well. So kind of keeps you on your toes a little bit more and makes it a little bit more interesting. In terms of Eddie Howe, I mean, listen, I have to say from a journalist point of view, he's really good to work with. He's very clever in what he says. He never gives too much away, to his credit. So that makes it a little bit difficult at press conferences, but he's got a really good sense of humour. And he's just, he's just a nice guy. He's just a nice guy, and he is respected by pretty much anyone he deals with. All us in the media respect him. You can tell the players respect him. The owners at the club do. I mean, listen, even honestly, I know I heard on the radio a couple of weeks ago, is there pressure now on Eddie Howe? I think it was after the draw against Bournemouth.
Nonsense.
I have to say, like, I'm not just saying this because you won at Fulham last weekend, but listen, even if Newcastle have a disappointing season and you finish in the bottom half, Eddie Howe will remain. Eddie Howe will remain. They see the long-term future with Eddie Howe at the helm. And I have to say, he deserves that for everything that he's changed. Yes, he's had a lot of money to spend without anything coming in. So yes, he has spent a lot, but it's the little things behind the scenes that he's changing, and the mindset at the club he's changing. I mean, they knew at that game Fulham last weekend they had to win that because things were slipping. And even before the man got sent off for Fulham, Chalobah, I think it was, even before he got sent off, Newcastle were bossing that game. And I honestly fully believe Newcastle would have gone on to have won that game. it's hard to pinpoint certain things. But the best way of saying it is, I've not heard one player say one bad word against him, and I mean current players and players that left. So look at guys who left in the summer, guys like Isaac Hayden, Dwight Gale, Kieran Clark, Hendricks gone on loan, these kind of guys. You know, a lot of these guys haven't had a look in under Eddie Howe since he arrived. And if that had happened under Steve Bruce or Rafa Benitez or other managers, there would be a little bit of rumblings in the camp. Not one of those players have said one bad word about Eddie Howe, either off the record or on the record, having left. Now, as well, you've got to look at, they could have just dug their heels in and stayed at Newcastle, because they've all got long contracts. But guys like Dwight Gale have left because they're like, I mean, Dwight Gale's probably thinking, now I'm 32 years old. I'm coming towards the end of my career. I could have just sat in Newcastle. My family are up here, but he's probably had a chat with him and said, look, I really could do with the space in the squad to bring in someone younger and more vibrant and whatnot. And I get the feeling he kind of, people want things to work for him. So they'll, whereas Dwight Gale might not have done that under another manager. He might not have done that under Steve Bruce. So listen, I mean, I could sit here for hours and talk about Eddie Howe, but I mean, he really is, he's, you know, I thought when the club were going for him, it was probably the wrong call. And I'll fully put my hands up now and say I was completely wrong there. I was aware that he'd been in for the Celtic job and then pulled out. And I just thought, oh God, has he got the stomach for this? Now I've kind of got to know him and had dealings with him. He absolutely does. I just think he's here for the long run. The only thing that would stop that would be if the Saudis said, hang on, results aren't good enough, and they took it out of, you know, Amanda Staveley and the board's hands. But I just feel everyone's pulling in the one direction there, and I can't see that happening. And I think whether it was through luck or whatever, I just feel that, you know, the appointment of Eddie Howe, we all know he wasn't the number one choice, but the appointment of Eddie Howe was the best piece of business Newcastle have done since the takeover went through. But in terms of how the club's changed under Mike Cass, I mean, listen, every department of the club, even just look at, and I think it's easy to forget this now. You look at the club now, there's a chairman, there wasn't a chairman before. There's a full board in place that weren't there. There is now a chief executive, which they didn't even have. They had a managing director in Lee Charnley. There is a sporting director of football in the shape of Dan Ashworth. Didn't have one of those. Like, it was Lee Charnley having to do everything alongside Steve Bruce. There's a head coach, and then there's all his staff behind him, and that is just staff, right? There's a full recruitment department now. They just had Steve Nixon before. Now they've got a team of about 5 or 6 working in the recruitment department. So, you know, the club has changed dramatically in terms of the staff. What hasn't changed is the training ground. They're still based in the same place. Yes, there's obviously work getting done there at the moment, and you know, it's the place isn't fit for purpose anymore, but they're going to have to just do what they can for the next couple of years to see them through, because they've got big name players coming there, and they want, you know, they want the treatment that they've got from their previous clubs. They don't want to come and essentially get treated like a club who are in the 2nd or 3rd tier. They'll just need to deal with that. There's obviously the stadium situation. Time will tell on what's going to happen there. But, you know, in terms of, I think it's easy for us to say, oh, hang on, what's really changed? Like, you look at the team, there's still some of the players there. But when you actually strip it down to the bones and actually look at how much has changed in the space of the last year, it's pretty amazing, actually, in terms of what's been done. And alongside that, the club have not just retained their Premier League, but are now in the top 6 in the Form League since the takeover went through this time last year. So, you know, I don't think you could have asked for much more. And I also feel that, you know, had you been given the resources like Man City were back in 2008 when there was no FFP, had you been given the resources just to go out and splash whatever you wanted on players, I don't know if it would be been as enjoyable for you. Yes, you would have got a real kick from it at the moment. Yeah, we've just signed Mbappe, we've just done this. But I actually think the journey, you know, the journey step by step, it will be stretched out longer. And I think the journey will be more enjoyable for you supporters than it would be going from 0 to 100 really fast, which would have been the case pre-financial fair play rules. So, you know, listen, the changes are endless, but those are just a few of the ones that sort of stick in my mind.
I guess you've answered pretty much everything that I was about to ask in terms of what else, which is cool. So I guess I may as well give my perspective on it as a fan, as opposed to a professional journalist. I thought when Eddie Howe came in, personally, I thought I looked at Man City's model. I guess it's quite a similar model to Manchester City in terms of what they're doing and how they're doing it, because they're looking at the much bigger infrastructure. It isn't a Chelsea where they're just splashing cash like it's without any, Man United, even more so. They're just chucking money away, like without any kind of strategy or structure. So I thought Eddie Howe was going to come in for maybe 2 years, something like that, as that sort of initial stepping stone. But the way I see it, yeah, they've given him this long-term deal. They've never specified how long that contract is, I don't think. Then they just said long-term deal when Newcastle United announced it. But everything he's doing is for the long term, isn't it? Everything they're doing is for the long term. You can see that, I think I was reading in The Athletic today that they've got 4 potential venues for the new training ground that they want to build. They're now going to be talking to developers about that. The academy that they've been talking about, you know, the academy's 10 years away. So Man City, in the summer, Man City sold something like 60 to 80 million pounds worth of academy generated players. So players they brought in young from abroad or from through the schools and colleges locally. But they made, you know, talk about commercial revenue coming in. We've spoken about this on the show a few times, Chris, haven't we? You can bring a lot of revenue in from your youth academy, bring them through and sell them on for 10, 15, 20 million pounds as well. So they're doing a huge amount, but that's 10 years away in terms of the academy. But I love what they're doing in terms of the big picture. You're right. We're in this sweet spot at the minute where there aren't quite the expectations of a Liverpool or a Man United, dare I say, or even Man City will win everything this year with that man up front.
That monster up front, yeah, absolutely, mate.
Best striker in the world. That's for another day. We're in that sweet spot where this is a transitional, probably year or 2 years. So if we finish, you know, we all did our predictions at the beginning of the season. I think I said we'll finish 7th. We're sitting in 7th at the minute. Will we be able to maintain that with the squad depth? All depends on what we do in January, you know, and depends on whether we can keep our key players fit and they're not all injured at the same time. But I think you're right. We are in that sweet spot where there isn't a huge amount of pressure. We can enjoy this journey because there isn't an expectation that we start the season and then we have to win a trophy. That will come. I think, was it yourself that had that exclusive with Amanda Staveley once the takeover was announced at Jesmond Dean House?
Yeah, well, quite a few of us got to be. I spoke to her first, but quite a few of us had. We all, there's about 3 or 4 of us all got interviews with her, so it wasn't just myself.
She said they want to win the league in 5 years' time, didn't she?
Yeah. I put those words in her mouth. Yeah, I should have done that.
Keep the fans.
I did say that. She said, "We do want to win the Premier League," and I said, "So when are you thinking then? 5-10 years?" And she went, "Yeah." And I think she just felt she had to go along with it. So yeah, I think she's been ruining saying those words and putting pressure on herself ever since.
But we are. I think we're ahead of the curve. You know, we have spent good money, but we've got a manager who is getting the best out of footballers. I think the only player he possibly hasn't got the best out of yet is probably St. Maximum. But I think he's an enigma in himself. And I think he's working towards that, you know, playing as part of a team. Every other player, I can't think of any other footballer who's getting a regular game that has regressed under Eddie Howe. So clearly, I mean, you know, it's nice that they're looking fit and they're training every day. But I just think that every part of this football club gives us positive vibes for the future. And I think he will be here for the longer term.
Yeah, I mean, I think just on St. Maximin, I think this year with St. Maximin probably as he enjoyed being the main man under Steve Bruce, and he was probably kind of allowed a bit more to do what he wanted. If he wanted to go back to France and get treatment, if he wanted extra days off, he was kind of allowed that because of who he was and what he provided. But Eddie Howe treats every player the same, really, and I think that's maybe why he's had it's been a little bit harder with St. Maximin. But listen, he's brilliant against Man City, absolutely brilliant. Scored that wonder goal against Wolves. And then got injured. I felt like he was just coming into a bit of form when he picked up the injury. But I'm the same as you, Paul. I predicted 7th as well. I just can't see many teams who are actually better than Newcastle. I can see, you know, I think we all know who the top 6 are. And then I just thought maybe a Wolves or a West Ham or something might, you know, and maybe Man United down in 7th. I thought one of those, but I don't see any reason why the club can't finish top 7. I think the difficult thing they're going to have in the next sort of year or two is it's difficult to attract top players when you're not in Europe. You know, all these players, even like your Madisons and your Tielemans and these guys and all the players they looked at in in the summer and tried to get in. Even the guys at Chelsea as well. They want to come, they want to play in Europe, and that's the problem. And until you get on that ladder, that's going to be difficult. So, you know, fair play for them landing Bruno, you know, landing Alex Isak, you know, Botman. But I think these are young players kind of for the future. It'll be really difficult. I don't think it'll be really difficult for them to go in and land a 26, 27-year-old full international who wants to play in the Champions League. And until they get themselves up to that, elevate themselves to that, it's going to be difficult. Once they do, I feel like the world is their oyster after that. Once they get into the Champions League, everyone will want to play for Newcastle. So, you know, it's going to be a challenge to get there, but I think it's a challenge that I feel that they're enjoying inside the club. And I think it's a challenge that you guys as fans really seem to be enjoying as well. Absolutely love it. Do you think, I guess one out-the-box question here, do you think they've missed the trick on anything thus far, a year in? In terms of transfers? No, not necessarily transfers. In terms of, I won't put words in your mouth here, but in terms of appointing any ambassadors to the club who might be potentially previous heroes. I think there's been conversations there. I'm not saying there's been too much water under the bridge, but I just think certain people, likes of your Alan Shearers, Kevin Keegans, these sorts of guys, haven't just wanted to sort of jump in until they saw what direction the club was going in first, if you know what I mean. Like, I think they just think it would be a little bit remiss of them just to jump in and say, yeah, I'm back, I'm here, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And, you know, they've got a little bit of pride as well. And I just think that they want to see what the club are going to do over a sort of short to medium term period before getting back on with that as well. I think you also have to realise as well, and obviously it's the sort of darker side of the takeover, but, you know, the issue with the Saudi human rights, you know, problems, it won't go away, and for some people they might not want to be seen to be championing all that as well. So I think it's a little bit of a delicate situation for certain individuals. I'm not saying it won't happen in the future, but I just thought everything was a little bit raw and fresh at the start for them to just go in and jump in and say, right, here, I'm the face of it now. So I think that's why the main reason as to why there's been a little bit of hold off on that situation. In terms of transfers, I think they missed I really think they missed a trick in the summer by bringing another attacker, a sort of winger type forward. I mean, you could see in that match, both matches against Palace and Bournemouth, the home games, you were just crying. Without Saint-Maximin in that team, you were just crying out for a bit of creativity. Amazing, of course, that you've then gone to Fulham and scored 4 and won, obviously against 10 men. But I just feel that was the one piece of the jigsaw missing this summer. And I think it will be the absolute priority in January to bring someone in that position.
It's a good segue, actually, Keith, into the kind of last question we've got, really. So, is the future as bright as we all hope it's going to be? You've touched upon some names there that we all salivate over as Newcastle fans. I mean, obviously, Maddison was outstanding the other night, you know, and I could just see him in a black and white shirt I could see him and Trippier arguing over a free kick in my mind there at one point. But obviously, Maddison, for the cost that he could be bought out as well in January. Tielemans as well, same thing. But I think, you know, you kind of answered a bit there. Do you think that without the European football, unless we get it this season, do you think we're going to have to go more smart buys by using that enhanced scouting network and finding guys like Bruno and Botman and getting ahead of even the likes of, you know, Garang Kuol that we've just pulled in as well? Do you think it's going to be a bit of that?
Absolutely. I think that is exactly what they're going to have to do. And listen, they've done it well so far. You know, I mean, it's easy for us to sit here and go, oh, well, they've not done this, they've not done that. But when you actually put it together, there's been 2 transfer windows and they've signed maybe 8 players, and 4 or 5 of them were like primary targets for them in the first place. So I actually think there's been a lot of change and I think they're doing it well. They're not just going in and doing it at Nottingham Forest and buying 22 players in one window. You know, they're buying, I think they got 4 and 3 or 4 and 4, and it's been a nice gradual change. And you look at the start 11 now compared to the starting 11 this time last year, it's probably only really Joe Linton, Saint-Maximin, Willock, probably, you know, maybe Longstaff. Like there's 7 or 8 new faces in that team sheet, and I think this time next year you'll probably find it'll be 10 or 11. There probably won't be many of them left at all. That's maybe being unfair on the likes of Saint-Maximin and Joe Linton because you don't know what's going to happen with them. But what I mean is we could see a team where there's, you know, 11 new faces since the takeover, going by the rate things are going at the moment. What were you asking, mate? Remember what you were asking about signings or something? What was it?
Yeah, I think Maddison's the big one. I probably want to. I'm not trying to put any words in your mouth, Keith, but obviously Maddison's been doing the rounds. Is that one that you kind of got little sniffs on that you think there may be a bit in that?
Sorry, I just once I start talking, I go off on a tangent, right, and then I forgot what you'd asked me. I'm used to asking the questions, not answering them. Maddison, do you know what? You're not going to want to hear this. I just don't think it's going to happen.
Oh.
I feel that the club were kind of led down the path a little bit with Maddison, and I think they were led to believe that they could have got him for circa £40 million, which is the bid that they put in. I can't remember exactly what it was. 40. There was maybe another one of 42 or 43 afterwards. And in hindsight, they were never going to get him in that. I think we all look at the guy. He's a quality player. He looks like minimum £60 million player. And in today's market, you see the price players are going for probably even more than that in terms of what he brings. He's an all-round player. And I think the club were led down the path and thought if they put a bit of that figure in, they could get him. I just feel James Maddison's at a stage in his career where he'll want to play European football if he was to leave Leicester. He'll want to play for a club. You even heard Monday night, against Forest afterwards, talking about the players at the big clubs, like talking about, he's talking about your Sterlings and your Fodens and your Grealishes and all these guys, the players at the big. He knows it's difficult for him to get to the team playing for Leicester. I just don't know if that would be the kind of move he would want in January or next summer. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw Maddison off the back of his recent form and off the back of the interest in him in the summer, sign a long-term deal at Leicester. And then if that happens, you need a big player to come in. You need a big like club, one of the top 4 clubs in the Champions League who are playing Champions League football every year to come in and get him. Listen, I might be wrong. I wouldn't be surprised if Newcastle did have a little nibble at him again in January or at the end of the season. And I hope I eat my words on this, but I don't know if I see Maddison to Newcastle happening.
And I guess a similar question about Tielemans. I think, they were heavily linked in the last couple of days of the window. My theory is he just going to hold out for mega wages that we refuse to pay because of the wage structure that we've got? Or is he a realistic target for us?
Well, Paul, you think about it, his contract's up at the end of the season. He can do what he wants. He could command any wage he wants. I don't know what he's on at Leicester, probably around about 80, 90,000 pound a week, something like that. He probably got similar to Newcastle, slightly maybe 100. For him to go now and get similar money at Newcastle to a club who are probably in a similar to Leicester, I think that's fair to say in terms of the sort of players they bring in. I know Leicester obviously have financial issues recently, but in terms of the stature of the club, the training ground at Leicester is unbelievable. The stadium's good, all that kind of stuff. Yes, Newcastle are a bigger club in terms of the fan base and the history and whatnot, but I just think for him, he would see that at this present time as a sideways step. He waits till the end of the season. He's got his pick of anywhere he wants to go, and he could probably more than double his wages. So, that's why I think the Tielemans thing will be difficult as well. But I thought he would have been an absolutely perfect replacement for Jonjo Shelvey when he moves on. I just thought he'd be a great guy to come, and I thought Maddison would have been more difficult to fit into Howe's formation because he obviously plays a 4-3-3, and Maddison maybe plays in that 10 role. But then watch Leicester the other night, and he played a 4-3-3, and he played in the right, and he was excellent. He kept drifting into the middle and picking up, finding pockets of space. So they might still have a nibble at one or both. I can just see Tielemans going to a Champions League club at the end of the season, maybe even signing a pre-contract in January with one of them. And I just think Maddison will be difficult. I think if I had to say one or the other would be more likely, it would probably be Maddison rather than Tielemans. I think Tielemans, I just can't see it happening. I think Newcastle was just having a little try, just in the off chance that Leicester really needed to sell. Like Leicester might have needed the money in the summer desperately, but they obviously resisted and he stayed. So I think they might have to be a little bit more creative. That was a question you were asking me. Do they need to be more creative? Do they need to continue to be creative? I think absolutely. I think, that's a sign of what's going to happen moving forward. The likes of Geraint Kuol, players like that, 18, 19, 20-year-olds who they can grow with the club and they can get 4 or 5 years more out of them. I think that's exactly what they're doing and they're trying to do moving forward. I can't see any more. Sorry.
I love those kind of signings, young players who are hungry, who want to join a project. call it a project, a bit of a cliche, but I love those kind of players. I would have loved that, you know, if we got Ekitike over the line before PSG started sniffing, those kind of young, hungry players that want to be with us for the long term, they pass my no dickhead policy, don't they, Chris?
Yeah, we're going to get t-shirts made up with PK's no dickhead policy on, Keith. So keep an eye out for them, mate, next time you're at St James Park. But listen, Keith, we know you've got you got your day job to go to, mate. So we really appreciate you coming on with this special episode. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, mate. And again, thanks from us and all the Newcastle United fans for the job that you did delivering that brilliant news on that special day, mate. So that's us going to sign off on this episode, guys. So thank you so much to everybody who's watched tonight, and thanks to Keith again. And as I mentioned, I'm going to slightly cover Keith's face just a bit. If you like it, please like and subscribe to the channel. Help us grow. Sorry, Keith. Help us grow. The channel's still quite young. We're younger than the takeover, as we often say. But this is Chris. This is Chris signing off. Let's keep supporting that team, McCoy United. Goodbye from me, Paul, and Keith, and we'll catch you later.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Keith.